welcome. I'm Rogers Anderson. Glad to be with you. And today we have a very special guest as we find those people in our communities that are adding different qualities of life, have lived it, born here, moved here. We've had such a wonderful group of people coming in. And today we have a lady that has written just a few books, but her pen name, real legal name, is Sarah Lee, but she prefers to go by Sally. And so I'm going to call her that. And thank you for being with us today.
Well, it's fun. It's fun to do this.
You know, I have found out over the years when we do this show and we build our library of people that we will always have on record, or we hope to, they want to know a little bit about Sally Lee. Where does she come from? How did she get here? How did you ever get involved in writing about different events, Beachville, I mean, poets? Start way back in your early life. And remember, we only have a 30-minute show, so we can't go over everything. But we'd love to know a little bit about you.
Like many other Nashvillians, I was born in St. Thomas Hospital, Nashville, back in the days when it birthed a lot of babies, which it then stopped doing later. But so it's a very normal thing to do. And grew up until I was almost 16 in what's now the Green Hills area. But when I was a very small child, it was just off Woodmont Boulevard on a little dead-end road that's still there as a little dead-end road. I can remember a man coming from my grandfather's barn with a pail of milk across the fields. And that's on Woodmont Boulevard. You know, now Woodmont Boulevard was built at that time, but it's still, but I was pretty little in those days. Well, we stayed there until after World War II, because during the war you couldn't build anything. I was born in 32, so I'm 81 years old now.
So now, did you have brothers and sisters?
I was the only one, but I had cousins right down the road. And actually, in my mother's family, there were 4 siblings, and all of them married within a 12-month period. Then they all began having children. So there's a whole bunch of cousins. Some lived in Brentwood, some lived right down the same little street I lived on. We were all the same age. Even my father's sister's boys were my age. We just a big, you know how Southerners are about cousins?
Oh, I do.
You know, and so we had this great group of cousins, only 2 girls, the rest of them were boys. And it was just lots of fun. You know, you didn't feel isolated. And then the little road I lived on was a very nice little road, and I have done some things and put in the archives in Nashville about that, because that area is popular for Vanderbilt professors to live, straight shoot, you know, close in, get on Hillsborough Road, get right down there. So we knew some it was sort of, and it was a nice place. Nice place to grow up, dead-end streets, you know, great for children.
Well, my notes indicate, though, during that period of time, and that was a different era of time. I'm certainly not as old as you, but I'm not too far from you.
Oh, yes, you are.
And, well, thank you, but I'm not. And it was a different time for males and females back then. From education, being an agricultural based, a lot of people find it hard to believe that Green Hills was agricultural, but it was.
Yeah, they hadn't quite built Hillsborough High. I can remember when they built Green Hills Market, which was the first grocery store out there. Before that, you went into Blair. But we're not telling the story of Nashville, we're telling the story of Williamson County, so I'll try to move it. I could talk about that a long time.
I'm sure you could.
And as far as education goes, I was so proud of my grandfather. His education had been interrupted by the Civil War. We throw back very fast in our family. We marry late. And he had 2 girls, 2 boys, sent everyone to Vanderbilt. He knew what it meant. Girls just like boys.
That's right.
And I'm really proud of him for that. So we grew up in that tradition. You know, and you know how many people went to Vanderbilt from Nashville in those days? Well, you don't, but just 50% of Vanderbilt was local students. We all lived at home, you know. But we moved out here in 1947 to where I live now, which is pretty close to the Davidson County line. my father worked in Nashville, and he just continued to do that. And my parents went to West End Methodist Church in Nashville, and they continued to do that, except they also wanted to be part of the community where they were moving. And there were other people, World War II had finished, and you could build. And so there's really a fair number of people who moved to Williamson County right about then. My Uncle and Aunt moved out to Old Town on Natchez Trace. They were the Good Pastures, and it had been a wonderful house, but it didn't have electricity or plumbing in it. And a woman from the north had used it for a summer home and hadn't been down in several years. The war had been going on, And, they worked on it and became a beautiful place. So we all kind of migrated, and I would say both my uncle and my father and other members of the family sort of had rural roots. My dad grew up partly out here on Columbia Pike. He wasn't born here, but he went to grade school right there where the grade school was across from St. Paul's Church, where the archives are now. It was in a Boy Scout troop here in Franklin. So you had this double roots. My mother grew up in Nashville, my father grew up in Franklin, and we live right in between now. We have done ever since. It was a pretty normal, well, not quite a normal life. Nobody's life is quite normal. But we moved out, and my parents built a very unusual house with a big space in it, which was made of wood, and they lived there 20 years, and it had a total fire. So it was obliterated. But for that 20 years, it was quite, they shared it with any Methodist youth group that wanted to have a party in their house was welcome to it. Lots and lots of square dancing went on. Lots of other, my mother loved big crowds. So I know how to put together a big supper, even though it's not my thing. My thing is smaller world, but she was a big world person. And I know how to do that without being scared. And I went to Vanderbilt, majored in English, went immediately, studied with Donald Davidson, who was the one fugitive poet that remained at Vanderbilt. Others had gone on to Kenyon and Yale and whatever. And he was there, and he was a very fine teacher, and he encouraged you. And the people who are now in my writing groups, they could say, well, okay, she encourages us because Donald Davidson encouraged her. And so I was so naive. But you remember, all of us think we were so naive when we were undergrads, when we're no longer undergrads. At the time, you don't know you're naive, but you do. So he said to me, well, I liked your fairy tale. Well, I didn't even know I'd written a fairy tale. And so I went to the University of Copenhagen and studied Hans Christian Andersen for a year after graduation from Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt very kindly recommended me for the Fulbright Committee, and I didn't make it, but Vanderbilt had recommended me, so my dad said, okay, Vanderbilt thinks you're okay, I'll send you. So he sent me. Lady said it was cheaper than sending me to Vanderbilt. Here in Copenhagen was cheaper. And it was a really good experience, first time away from home, because we lived I was living in Williamson County then, and I rode the Franklin Urban Bus from the time we moved out here. The day we moved, my father had always given me a dime. Well, I had an allowance by then, so I didn't need the dime. It cost me a dime to ride the Franklin Urban Bus from where I caught it to Woodmont Boulevard. The day we moved out, I had to have a quarter because it was going to cost me a quarter from riding the bus from where I caught it, which at that point was in what they call Hillsborough Village now, out to our driveway, and the bus would stop for the driveways, you see.
I'll let you get your breath a minute, but it's funny, there's a lot of conversation, and just this week, in fact, or recently, a lot of attention has been focused on transit issues. One of the abbreviations is called the ARPS, which is traveling back and forth on West End Avenue to me over there.
Oh yeah, there's it. Thank you.
Back and forth on West End Avenue.
I heard some of that controversy. Vanderbilt's encouraging it.
Vanderbilt's encouraging.
City's encouraging it, but on the other hand, some people don't want it.
which is normal. But my point is that when you were in school, we had a transit system.
A good transit system.
And it went by the way of the wayside.
Well, after the war, you know, those of us who had been in high school grew up and began to drive cars, and it was after the war, and you could do that. And after a while, I can remember when the bus system on Hillsborough Road picked up no one but the maids. And after the war, there weren't that many maids either. There were fewer and fewer. And so they just said, we can't do this. And then every now and then they'd try to revive it. And it ran Hillsborough Road and Franklin Road, and it was a very good thing. And I rode it through high school. Somehow I'm a little slow, and so I didn't drive until I got to college. And I rode it. You rode it home. Your dad dropped you off in school because he went to town in the mornings, and then you rode it home in the afternoons. But transit systems are, you know, I was in the 5th grade when World War II started. Our parents immediately stopped driving us to school. At that point, I was going to Peabody, which was now a university school.
Right.
And we walked down, there must have been 6 or 8 of us walked down from what's now the university school down to in front of Vanderbilt Nursing School, across Hillsborough Road, stood there. The bus picked us up in we waited maybe 10 minutes. And some of them came all the way to Franklin, on that bus. And when one teacher at Franklin High started teaching at Ward Belmont, and her daughter came, they rode the bus back and forth.
Well,
it worked.
It did work.
But that's because we knew it had to. Mother didn't have any gas to drive you around.
Well, and that's part of in fact, I was meeting with some people today, earlier this morning, about the transit system and probably broadening out the definition of, we think of transit as being only bus or only rail or only whatever. Really, transit is everything from school buses to walking to biking.
Bicycles.
You a few short years ago, you were probably on some cutting edge of getting on the bus, but it was out of necessity, and your parents said, we're not driving that way anymore.
Yeah, all the parents stopped.
Here's a dime,
there
put
you
on out
go.
the door. But today, you take any of our schools, particularly our high schools, on any given day, there's probably 30 to 40%
driving
that are driving.
I know. It's
not
just
riding.
wild.
And,
it's just wild. It's good.
and those are individual choices that parents make, but there's a lot of congestion, and people saying, well, help fix the congestion. It could be fixed if all the children rode the school buses. Now, it's not as simple as that. But
listen, we drive in to come to church at 7 o'clock in the morning at St. Paul's on Tuesday morning. We drive in Hillsborough Road, right in front of the high school. You give it an extra 10 minutes.
Yes, you do. But anyway, we got you in
We got me in high school, got in college, went to Copenhagen, came back, took a master's degree at Vanderbilt in English because I just didn't know what else I wanted to do. Went out with the Methodist Church to Japan for 4 years, taught in a Japanese university because I had a master's from Vanderbilt. And so they put me in a really elegant place in Japan. It was lovely, really lovely campus, wonderful students, a girls' school. But I went on the short-term program because at that point over World War II, the war, I guess, affected my life more than I think it did. The schools had lost their teachers, and so the churches ran. This was before John Kennedy became president, so he started the Peace Corps. But the churches did something like Peace Corps before that. We were short term. We signed a contract that we would not marry for 3 years. We went out and taught English mostly all over the world. I taught in Tokyo. It was a very sophisticated place. I only lived in one other city, and that was Copenhagen. And it was quite wonderful. You really learned a lot. And came home, and in Tokyo, I had met a man my age, just about 2 years older than I was, who had grown up a mile from me in Green Hills. We had never met. And came home and taught college English for a little bit, about 2 years, and took a job in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which was close enough for him to court me. The interstates weren't built yet, but he drove up every Saturday night. So I realized finally that sunk in. Hey, I don't even have to think what I'm going to do on Saturday night. I'm going out to dinner with John. And that worked out pretty well, and we've been married more than 50 years now. And but we say we met in Tokyo, and that's kind of a shock,
Yeah,
especially as we grew up so close to each other. But you know, a 5th grade boy just doesn't pay attention to a 3rd grade girl. You know, you can be 2 years older than a girl in your neighborhood and not know her at all. And our parents had been to the same church for a while, but by the time we were teenagers, that had changed. You know, things just, so it worked out very well. And he's an architect and a very fine artist. And we live in a house that he designed. And it's not very large, and it's just amazing house. And I've lived in it for 50 years. And that's a really nice thing for me.
Now, you all had how many children?
3 children, and they're all in their 40s now, which is a sort of a shock. But I'll tell you, all the grandchildren are in California, which is ghastly. But my son went to California, and he married a California girl, and I thought he just shook the Tennessee dust off his feet, you know, that biblical thing. Well, he had 2 boys. He named them Harpeth and Natchez.
Harpeth and Natchez. Okay.
And I thought, he loves Tennessee after all. And Harpeth, when he was little, now he's 13, but when he's little and he came here, and the name Harpeth is just everywhere. You know, as soon as he could read it all, by the time he's 4, he can read his name, you know. It was just really exciting. And you know, it's on the back of cars because they're sold by Harpeth Motors or something.
Yeah.
It's just, it's everywhere. So that was very, very comforting to me that he named his sons for things as basic to his home, because all of them were born on the land we live on now. And where we live is the back of my parents' farm. And so now my daughter lives where my parents lived.
Well, now, is your farm a century farm? Is it been
No,
in the
we
family?
we didn't buy it until 38 or 9.
Okay.
And so we're not a century farm, but the black family up the road is. They bought theirs in 1909. And Harper Church is down the other way down the road, and they formed in 1811. So we're surrounded by some, well, I call us a middle family. We're not an old family, we're a middle family. Because we didn't come along till the 1930s, you know.
life, I mean, you present a different avenue of life for so many females.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got a good education, which is
and I think you know that and realize that. When I look at you and my mother, who is still living, is 92, hers was an entirely different way of life. Coming from less educated people, stressed education, but had to work. Finished high school and immediately traveled to Oak Ridge, Tennessee to find work at the facility that had made the hydrogen or helped produce the hydrogen.
Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge was Oak Ridge.
And that's where she had met my father, my dad, in that environment. And both of my parents, though, at that time, who were certainly older than you, saw and understood the value of education, so that
they made sure you did.
My sister and myself, we were afforded a higher level of education, and it's almost a 365 circle now that here in Williamson County, one of the things that we're noted for when you get outside the circles of Williamson County is good, solid public education. And I know that you have put literally a lifetime into learning, and it has paid you many benefits. But likewise, you get on into to writing of the books and leaving a little bit of history for all of us to enjoy. If you don't mind, touch on those, or how did we get to that point in life?
Oh, you mean how did we get to the books, or how did I get to writing the books?
Yes,
well, just to get to the Williamson County Schools for a minute, my children went to Grassland, and
mine too.
When my first child was born, Grassland had 6 rooms. It taught 8 grades in 6 rooms, and it had a cafeteria library, 1 room that was both cafeteria. By the time she started first grade, they had added 17 rooms and a gymnasium. You know, it was an entirely different suburban school.
Now, was this on Bethlehem?
Yeah, it was on Bethlehem Loop, back when it was on Bethlehem Loop. And then Bethlehem Methodist Church, straight across the street, had the kindergarten. It was a great kindergarten, and it fed straight into Grassland, and you could, drop your kids off for both right there. It was in the community situation was just very nice, very satisfactory, and So we were really happy with all that for a long time. Anyway, to the books. I didn't teach. Once I married, I stopped work. And my husband and I agreed. We married in the early 60s, and it was a wonderful time to marry because you could make a choice. You could decide to be traditional, or you could decide to have a job. You weren't pushed. I think the next generation women were pushed. You expected to have a job, but I could just do either one. So we decided that he would earn the living and I would look after the children. And then we had 3 children who all turned out to be a girl, a boy, a girl. And people kept saying, "Oh, you're so lucky to have the boy in between because you have less rivalry if you mix the sexes as they go down this line." And all of them we were living where we're living now, in the house their father had designed, which is really a nice thing, and we have lots of woods and space around us. And, so. In fact, a big tree fell down just this week. In these storms we've just had, big tree fell down. Didn't hit the house or the fence. Well, great. So we don't have to hurry to cut it up, but we're in that much woods, So then the children get bigger, and in some sense, in some ways, they don't quite need you as much. And you do some, assistant Brownie Scout leading, some of that kind of thing. And when George Northern, was the first principal at Scales, right. And he immediately, and my children then were transferred to Scales, he immediately started having parents come and volunteer. So I taught Williamson County history there, and then he got a more sophisticated program, and I think I taught 3rd grade drama for one time, and that was fun. And then I was teaching a little boy. I had taught English second language in Japan, so I know how to do that. And they had a little boy from Iran who had started in the 4th grade at Scales, and I taught him an hour and a half a day because I said if I was going to teach him, I wouldn't teach him less than that. I mean, an hour and a half is what they could give me. There was language arts unit of the day, And he went from knowing the alphabet song, which he learned in Tehran, to 3rd grade level before Christmas. He was a very smart kid, but the school did really helped him, and I really helped him, He had trouble accepting women as a teacher, but they'd given him a 4th grade teacher. They had a male 4th grade teacher, and they'd put him in the male's class, which helped a lot. It was fun. And then my children got bigger and older, and I began teaching again, college level, and I taught at MTSU. But I was on my late 50s when I started doing that, so I wasn't looking for a career. If you're looking for a career, there's lots of pressure on you. But if you're just teaching because you really love to teach, and they would hire me, well, then I taught at Columbia State, the night classes, right here in Franklin, not down at Columbia, but right here, back when they were in the, well, maybe they still are, in the building. Well, even before they're in the building, they were in that shopping center where the Kroger is on Independence Street. I taught that. Wonderful administrator, brilliant woman. She was so good. And then they moved over to the place where they are now. And taught there, and then taught at MTSU for a while. But I wasn't going to be hired for tenure at 60 years old, no matter what the law says about aging. So I didn't even worry about that, And so then I taught at Aquinas a couple of years, which was a very, very interesting experience for me. And finally, I'd been there. I was only there 2 years, but finally the librarian said, "Come back in the stacks and have lunch with us." And I'd bring my lunch, and a lot of the nuns would be back in the stacks of the library having lunch together. That was fun. I started doing these books. This one was in the 90s. I was still teaching and stuff like that. This is the Poets of St. Paul's. And what we did at St. Paul's Church was just ask for poetry. Now, it's a little iffy progress to do that, because what if someone submits a poem that you really don't think is very good? And do you tell a church member that their poem is not good? That's not so easy. But what happened was I didn't expect it to be this long. I expected it to be much shorter, just a little pamphlet. And we have 90 pages of poetry and 16 different poets, 4 of whom handed a lot of poetry in. I put in a lot. My husband, architect husband at the time, was junior warden of St. Paul's, and that means you're in charge of the building. So actually for 2 years he was in charge of the building. So I knew what was happening in connection with the building. So I started writing poems about the different aspects of the building. And there's an English poet named George Herbert who did that 400 years ago, wrote these beautiful, beautiful poems about church buildings. And so I sort of didn't pattern on him because he was good and I was an amateur, but that sort of started it. And I thought we'd just have a little pamphlet up in the foyer of the church to, people could pick up for meditation. Well, we turned out with lots of things. And so I got myself an editorial committee of church members, and it turned out to be good. It was fun, and people like it, and we ordered too many, and so now we give it away to new members. For a while we sold it for $5, and now we just give it away.
Let me kind of jump in here because I've got 2 more books, and we're running out of time, and I want you to opportunity
talk about
to
the books.
touch about them. We've got a couple of minutes left in our show.
Well, I only got a couple of minutes. We'll go speed through these books. Here's a book. This was the next one. I've been in some. I have some other books too, but these are the 3 that relate to the county. This is the history of the western part of Brentwood, and at one time it had its own post office, which was called Beechville. Now, actually, the post office was only there about 23 years as a post office. But this history begins in geologic time with the fossils. Because every kid in Middle Tennessee that goes to kindergarten learns the fossils in kindergarten, So we began with the fossils, and we came up to 2005. Other people helped write it, especially the churches in that community. They often had someone who had done a history of the church anyway. This book we started late, and Rick Warwick really encouraged that. This book we started after that. I had written a story. It's actually based on George Northern's grandfather, whose name was Harry Berry. The little black boy in the story is historical, but everything else is fictional. It was a fictional story. But that child learned to read while he was still a slave. So that was a really unusual situation. And I couldn't find anybody to publish it, so I thought I'd give my story a good home, and here's the good home. We put out flyers. Rick Warwick gave me some advice. Put out flyers, gave 18-month lead time. You could submit anytime within the next 18 months. And look, it's 300-something pages. It's amazing. And we have, and I did ask the photographer for this, the official photographer for this book was a 14-year-old that goes to St. Paul's.
I have to interrupt you. We've run out of time. Thank you for being with us and talking a little bit about your life and what you have done here in Williamson County. We love it. We appreciate it. I know there's ways for people can contact you. Could have balanced it out a little. I'm Rogers Anderson. Thanks for being with us today. See you around the county later on.
Where can I find out about the Venus flytrap?
Where can I research information on my business competitors?
What is the safety record on the car I want?
Where can I research careers?
Where?
I'm all shook up.
The Tennessee Electronic Library. That's where. And it's free to everyone in our state. Now go to your public library and find out how you can log on and get your password to a world of information just for living in our state. You can probably even figure out the password just by listening to my voice.
I'm all shook up.